Sarah Martinez had always dreamed of serving her country, but not in the way most people expected. Growing up in a small Texas town, she watched her father return from multiple deployments with stories that both inspired and haunted her. While other kids played video games, Sarah learned to tie tourniquets and treat wounds from her father, a former Army medic who believed everyone should know how to save a life. At 18, Sarah enlisted in the Navy with one clear goal: to become a hospital corpsman and serve alongside the Marines. Her recruitment officer tried to steer her toward other roles, suggesting that combat medicine wasn't suitable for someone her size. Standing barely 5 feet 4 inches tall with a quiet demeanor, Sarah didn't look like the typical warrior. But beneath her calm exterior burned an unshakable determination that would soon prove everyone wrong. Boot camp at Great Lakes was brutal, but Sarah excelled. While others struggled with the physical demands, she found strength she never knew she possessed. Her drill instructors noticed something special about the young woman who never complained, never quit, and always helped her struggling shipmates. During medical training, Sarah's natural aptitude became evident. She could start an IV in seconds, perform emergency procedures under pressure, and somehow remained calm when others panicked. After completing her initial medical training, Sarah received orders that would change her life forever. She was assigned to Camp Pendleton to train with Marine units preparing for deployment to Afghanistan. The Marines she would serve with were initially skeptical. They had worked with Navy medics before, but Sarah seemed different. She was quieter than most, spending her free time studying medical journals and practicing emergency procedures until her hands moved with mechanical precision. During training exercises, Sarah proved herself repeatedly. When a Marine accidentally cut himself badly during a night operation, Sarah appeared out of nowhere in the darkness, stopping the bleeding and treating the wound so efficiently that even the hardened sergeants took notice. She moved through the chaos of simulated combat like a ghost, always appearing where she was needed most. The Marines began to trust her, and more importantly, they began to rely on her. As deployment approached, Sarah's commanding officer pulled her aside for a conversation that would haunt her for years. He explained that the Taliban had been specifically targeting medics, knowing that eliminating medical support would demoralize entire units. He offered her a chance to transfer to a safer assignment, but Sarah refused without hesitation. She had trained for this moment her entire adult life, and she wouldn't abandon the Marines who had accepted her as one of their own. The night before deployment, Sarah sat alone in her barracks writing letters to her family. She had no way of knowing that within months her name would be whispered with reverence and fear in equal measure. The quiet medic who had dedicated her life to saving others was about to discover a talent for taking lives that would shock everyone who knew her, including herself. The helicopter touched down in Helmand Province on a scorching August morning, and Sarah felt her stomach drop as the reality of war hit her. The forward operating base was a collection of concrete barriers, sandbags, and determination held together by the will of the soldiers who called it home. The smell of diesel fuel, dust, and something else she couldn't identify filled her nostrils as she gathered her medical supplies and followed her unit to their assigned quarters. Within hours of arrival, Sarah received her first taste of combat medicine in Afghanistan. An IED explosion had torn through a patrol 3 miles from base, and the casualties were coming in fast. Sarah worked for 18 straight hours, her hands covered in blood as she fought to save Marines who had been laughing with her just days before. She lost 2 soldiers that first day, and the weight of their deaths settled on her shoulders like a physical burden she would carry forever. The weeks that followed blurred together in a haze of patrols, medical emergencies, and sleepless nights. Sarah discovered that war was nothing like the training exercises back home. The heat was unbearable, the terrain unforgiving, and the enemy was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. But she adapted quickly, learning to move silently through the rocky landscape and anticipate where she would be needed before the call for a medic even came. During a particularly dangerous patrol in September, Sarah's unit was pinned down by sniper fire in a narrow valley. 3 Marines had been wounded and they were trapped in the open with no cover. Without hesitation, Sarah grabbed her medical bag and crawled across 50 yards of exposed ground while bullets whistled overhead. She reached the first wounded Marine and began treating his injuries, her hands steady despite the chaos surrounding them. As she worked, Sarah noticed the muzzle flashes from the enemy sniper's position on a distant ridge. Something inside her mind clicked into place and she found herself studying the shooter's pattern, with the same analytical approach she used for medical procedures. The sniper was good, but he had habits. He fired 3 shots, then moved to a slightly different position. He favored his right side, and he was using the shadows of the rocks to conceal his movement. While continuing to treat the wounded Marine, Sarah called out coordinates to her unit's designated marksman. But the Marine sniper couldn't get a clear shot from their position, and more of her friends were getting hurt. In that moment, something fundamental changed inside Sarah Martinez. The woman who had dedicated her life to healing was about to discover she had an extraordinary gift for ending lives with surgical precision. That night, back at base, Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the sniper's movements, analyzing his technique like she would study a medical procedure. She found herself at the armory, asking the Marines about their weapons and ballistics. When they asked why a medic wanted to know about long-range shooting, Sarah couldn't give them an answer that made sense. She just knew that understanding the enemy's tools might help her save more lives, even if she didn't yet understand how. The opportunity came 3 weeks later, during what should have been a routine medical supply run to an outpost deeper in Taliban territory. Sarah's convoy was ambushed in a mountain pass, and within minutes, half her unit was wounded or dead. The Marines fought desperately, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. From her position behind an overturned Humvee, Sarah watched helplessly as enemy fighters moved closer to their position. Sergeant Mike Torres, the unit's designated marksman, had been hit in the shoulder and couldn't hold his rifle steady. His rifle lay beside him, a precision instrument capable of reaching targets over 1,000 yards away. Without thinking, Sarah grabbed the weapon and quickly adjusted the scope settings, her mind automatically calculating distance, wind speed, and elevation based on knowledge she didn't remember acquiring. The first shot surprised everyone, including Sarah herself. An enemy fighter who had been advancing on their position suddenly dropped, struck cleanly through the chest from over 600 yards away. The Marines around her stared in disbelief as their medic worked the bolt action with practiced efficiency and fired again. Another enemy fighter fell, then another. Each shot was precise, clinical, almost surgical in its accuracy. In 15 minutes, Sarah eliminated 7 enemy combatants and effectively ended the ambush. The remaining Taliban fighters retreated, unwilling to face the mysterious sniper who seemed to appear from nowhere. When the shooting stopped, Sarah set down the rifle and immediately returned to her primary duty, treating the wounded Marines with the same calm efficiency she had just displayed while taking lives. Word of the incident spread quickly through the base, and Sarah found herself summoned to meet with her commanding officer and several other senior personnel she didn't recognize. They asked detailed questions about her shooting experience, her training, and how she had acquired such remarkable marksmanship skills. Sarah answered honestly that she had never received formal sniper training and had only fired a rifle a handful of times during basic military training. What Sarah couldn't explain to them was how natural it felt. The mathematics of ballistics came to her as easily as calculating drug dosages. Reading wind patterns was like reading vital signs. Most importantly, the same calm focus that made her an exceptional medic seemed to translate perfectly to precision shooting. She could slow her breathing, control her heartbeat, and eliminate all external distractions with the same mental discipline she used during emergency medical procedures. The officers exchanged meaningful glances and told Sarah they would be in touch. That night, Sergeant Torres approached her with a mixture of gratitude and amazement. He explained that some of the shots she had made were beyond the capability of most trained snipers, and he offered to help her develop her newly discovered abilities. Sarah accepted, though she insisted that her primary duty would always be as a medic. Over the following weeks, Torres worked with Sarah during their limited downtime, teaching her advanced shooting techniques and helping her understand the science behind long-range precision shooting. Sarah absorbed the knowledge like a sponge, and her natural abilities continued to astound everyone who witnessed them. She could consistently hit targets at distances that challenged even experienced snipers, and she did it with an almost supernatural calm that unnerved even her closest friends. The mission that would define Sarah's reputation came on a cold November morning, when intelligence reported that a high-value Taliban commander was planning a major attack on nearby coalition forces. The target was holed up in a compound 6 miles from base, surrounded by heavily armed fighters and using civilian hostages as human shields. Traditional assault tactics would result in massive casualties on both sides and likely kill innocent people. Captain James Morrison, a Navy SEAL team leader who had been monitoring Sarah's unusual skills, requested her for a joint operation. The plan was surgical. A small team would infiltrate close to the compound while Sarah provided overwatch and precision elimination of key targets. Morrison had seen the reports of her shooting abilities and believed she might be the solution to their seemingly impossible mission. Sarah found herself lying prone on a rocky ridge at dawn, staring through a high-powered scope at a compound, buzzing with enemy activity. Beside her, Morrison whispered target priorities through his radio, identifying which fighters posed the greatest threat to the rescue operation. The distance to target was over 1,200 yards, complicated by shifting winds and the need for absolute precision to avoid hitting civilians. The first shot had to be perfect. Sarah had identified the compound sniper, positioned in a tower overlooking the only safe approach route for the SEAL team. Through her scope, she could see him clearly, unaware that death was watching him from over 3/4 of a mile away. Sarah controlled her breathing, felt her heartbeat slow to an almost meditative rhythm, and gently squeezed the trigger. The enemy sniper dropped instantly, and chaos erupted in the compound below. But instead of random panic, Sarah began methodically eliminating specific targets with machine-like precision. Guard commanders, weapons specialists, and anyone who posed a threat to the advancing SEAL team fell one by one. Each shot was calculated not just for accuracy, but for psychological impact on the remaining fighters. What happened next would be talked about in military circles for years to come. As the SEAL team moved through the compound, Sarah provided covering fire that bordered on the supernatural. She could see threats before they fully emerged from cover, anticipate enemy movements, and deliver precisely placed shots that eliminated dangers the ground team couldn't even see yet. In 43 minutes, she fired 37 rounds and recorded 35 confirmed kills. But the moment that would burn itself into the memory of every SEAL present came when Sarah spotted an enemy fighter preparing to detonate a suicide vest near a group of hostages. The target was partially concealed behind concrete barriers, with only a small portion of his head visible through a gap barely larger than a silver dollar. The shot required threading the bullet through a space the size of a playing card at over 1,000 yards. Sarah's shot struck the bomber precisely in the brainstem, killing him instantly and preventing the detonation. The hostages were saved. The mission was a complete success, and Sarah had demonstrated a level of precision shooting that defied conventional understanding. Morrison later reported that watching Sarah work was like witnessing a master surgeon operate, except her operating table was a battlefield, and her instruments delivered death with mathematical precision. That night, as Sarah cleaned her rifle in the armory, she realized that something inside her had fundamentally changed. The woman who had enlisted to save lives had discovered she possessed an almost supernatural ability to take them. The duality of her nature as both healer and killer was beginning to tear at her soul, though she couldn't yet understand the full weight of what she was becoming. Word of Sarah's extraordinary abilities reached the highest levels of military command, and within weeks, she found herself reassigned to work exclusively with Special Operations Forces. The transition was jarring for a woman who had enlisted as a medic, but Sarah discovered that her unique combination of medical training and precision shooting made her invaluable to teams operating in the most dangerous corners of Afghanistan. The SEAL teams she worked with treated her differently than her previous Marine unit had. These were men who understood the weight of taking lives, and they recognized something in Sarah that even she was still struggling to accept. She was no longer just a medic who could shoot. She was becoming something entirely new, a hybrid warrior who could save lives and end them with equal skill and precision. During a particularly difficult mission in the mountains near the Pakistani border, Sarah's team was tasked with eliminating a Taliban cell that had been kidnapping and executing aid workers. The enemy had taken refuge in a series of caves that made conventional assault nearly impossible. For 3 days, Sarah lay motionless on a distant peak, waiting for clear shots at targets who rarely exposed themselves for more than a few seconds. The psychological toll of the constant vigilance began to show. Sarah found herself calculating kill shots even during moments of rest, her mind automatically analyzing angles and distances wherever she looked. She stopped eating regularly and barely slept, maintaining a level of focus that worried even the hardened SEALs who worked with her. They had seen snipers burn out before, but Sarah's intensity was unlike anything they had witnessed. On the fourth day, opportunity finally presented itself. The Taliban leader emerged from the caves to coordinate with other fighters, and Sarah had a window of less than 10 seconds to take the shot. The distance was over 1,500 yards. The wind was gusting unpredictably, and the target was partially concealed by rocky outcroppings. It was an impossible shot by any reasonable standard, but Sarah had moved beyond reasonable standards. The bullet flew true, striking the target precisely in the center of his chest and eliminating the cell's leadership in a single moment. The remaining fighters, demoralized by the seemingly supernatural accuracy of their unseen enemy, abandoned their positions within hours. The mission was another complete success, but Sarah felt nothing resembling satisfaction. Each perfect shot was becoming a weight on her soul, even as her reputation grew among the special operations community. Back at base, Sarah began experiencing nightmares that blended her medical training with her sniper skills. She dreamed of saving lives and taking them simultaneously, of healing wounds with one hand while inflicting them with the other. The clear moral distinction between helping and hurting that had guided her entire life was becoming blurred beyond recognition. Captain Morrison noticed the changes in Sarah and arranged for her to speak with a military psychologist. During their sessions, Sarah struggled to articulate the internal conflict that was tearing her apart. She had discovered she possessed a gift that could save her fellow soldiers and eliminate threats to innocent civilians. But using that gift required her to become someone she had never intended to be. The psychologist explained that many warriors struggled with similar conflicts, but Sarah's situation was unique. Most soldiers were trained to compartmentalize their roles as healers or fighters. Sarah was being forced to embody both simultaneously, and the psychological pressure was enormous. The doctor recommended that Sarah consider specializing in one role or the other, but Sarah knew that wasn't possible. Her fellow soldiers needed both sides of her abilities, and she couldn't abandon them regardless of the personal cost. The final mission of Sarah's deployment would become legendary among special operations forces, though the full details would remain classified for years. Intelligence had located the mastermind behind a series of attacks on coalition medical facilities, a Taliban commander who specifically targeted hospitals and aid workers. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah that her last mission would be hunting someone who killed the very people she had originally enlisted to protect. The target was surrounded by an army of fighters in a fortified position that had already repelled 2 conventional assaults. The mission parameters were clear: eliminate the commander and his key lieutenants while minimizing civilian casualties and avoiding American losses. It was exactly the type of impossible task that had become Sarah's specialty. But the stakes had never been higher. For 7 hours, Sarah held an overwatch position while SEAL teams maneuvered through hostile territory below. She fired 63 rounds and recorded 58 confirmed kills, including shots that defied everything military snipers thought they knew about the limits of precision shooting. She eliminated targets hiding behind cover by ricocheting bullets off metal surfaces, fired through gaps smaller than coins, and consistently hit moving targets at distances beyond the capability of most military rifles. But the shot that would cement her legend came when the Taliban commander attempted to escape using a human shield. Through her scope, Sarah could see the terrorist holding a knife to the throat of a young girl, using her as protection while moving toward a waiting vehicle. The angle was impossible, the margin for error non-existent, and any mistake would result in an innocent death. Sarah fired a single shot that passed within millimeters of the child's ear and struck the commander precisely in the brainstem, killing him instantly while leaving his hostage completely unharmed. The shot was so precise, so impossibly accurate, that the SEAL team members who witnessed it would later struggle to convince others that it had actually happened. When Sarah finally returned home, she carried with her a reputation that preceded her wherever she went. The SEALs she had worked with spoke of her abilities in hushed, almost reverent tones, describing a woman who could deliver death and healing with equal precision. They said her fury was burned into memory because anyone who had seen her work would never forget the cold, calculating efficiency with which she eliminated threats to her brothers in arms. But Sarah also carried invisible wounds that no medal or commendation could heal. She had saved hundreds of lives through her medical skills, and eliminated threats that would have killed countless innocents. But the psychological cost of being both healer and killer had fundamentally changed her. She struggled to find her place in a world where she was simultaneously celebrated as a hero and haunted by the lives she had taken. Years later, Sarah would eventually find peace by establishing a foundation that provided medical training to veterans and first responders. She discovered that teaching others to save lives helped balance the weight of the lives she had taken. She never spoke publicly about her time as a sniper, but those who knew her story understood that she had embodied a unique form of service that demanded the ultimate sacrifice, becoming someone she had never intended to be in order to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The SEALs who fought beside her would carry her story forward, ensuring that future generations of warriors would remember the medic who became one of the most feared and respected snipers in military history. Her legacy was written in both the blood of enemies and the lives of the countless soldiers and civilians she had saved, a testament to the complex nature of heroism in an imperfect world.